Schofield delivers the good in Damascus steel. Swatch milks the cow that is the Moonswatch yet again. A batch of new Seiko 5s drop, and Longines get in the mood for summer. Welcome to the Scottish Watches podcast. We've been on our travels. Locally, not internationally this time, although we do have a really good trip coming up to down south, down in Ingerland, but we're going to tell you about that maybe later on in this episode, if Dave has figured out the logistics of how we're going to get from Scotland to England, avoiding any kind of football shenanigans, any kind of talk to do with that, because we're not into football, thankfully. Because if we were into football, we'd be recording this drunk, I think.
And we'd be disappointingly underwhelmed, especially when it came to Germany. But we're now playing today, I believe, as we're recording this, we're going to be playing the country that I work in, Switzerland. So I'm pretty pleased not to be in Switzerland at this point in time, because we will lose. That is not a premonition, that is merely a fact.
It's what Scottish people do when they play football, not when they do watch podcasts, because it's win, win, win all the way. When you're listening to us or watching us on YouTube, I should probably start with a brand that is not Scottish. I'm afraid it does come from the nether regions of the UK down south, and it's a guy that I've spoken to a couple of times. We met him a number of times. We met him at British Watchmakers, funnily enough, just a few months ago, and that is the very strange but unique gentleman that runs Schofield Watches. And if you've ever seen the watches they produce, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. They have a very mystical look about them. They have an aura that is just slightly left of centre. It's almost like a parallel universe has encroached onto our space and time dimension. And this one here we're going to talk about is really weird. It's almost like a camera obscura.
Well, you say camera obscura. I guess the clue's in the name. It's the Schofield Obscura. And the, as you described him, strange gentleman. Well, let's say strange in the good way, in the same way that we are strange, is Giles Ellis. And Schofield as a brand is a relatively new brand, being introduced back in 2011. So what does that make it? That makes it 13 years old, something around that age. It was originally launched at Salon QP, a show that, again, sadly, no longer exists, as the magazine at that point was doing shows, and the magazine, and then it went out of business. It is back again, but the show's not. So anyway, on with the watch. That original watch was the Signalman, and it brought a very new and distinctive look. Now, okay, it's a watch. Most watches look broadly similar, but he definitely has a chunkier, in-your-face kind of vibe. Now, that probably comes from the fact that Giles doesn't come from the watchmaking industry. He's not a watchmaker. He is somebody who is very much into design. He also, I believe, lectures at one of the universities, not sure which one, but one of the English universities. He lectures down there as well. And this is a watch that has been many years in the making, this being the Obscura, as we mentioned. I like this a lot. It ticks many boxes for me. Unusual case material, that will be a tick, because we're using Damascus steel, a material that has been used by a couple of brands, but is definitely one of the more rarely seen materials.
And in this case, Dave, this does not look like your normal Damascus steel. If I had to point fingers at this, and I did before I read the tech spec, I would have said this was made with superconductor.
Well, it has quite a unique textural pattern to it, if we want to call it that. And one of the nice things about Damascus steel is you can play about with the material and the constituent parts of it. You can play around with acid etching, and you can come up with a few different feels and vibes about it.
Well, do you want to explain what Damascus steel is for people that don't know?
So in layman's terms, I guess the best way to describe it is it's a steel material where you layer in different materials, and it's a bit like making pastry, where you kind of layer them over on top of each other, and you get these, for want of a better description, swirls generally. The most common Damascus pattern you'll see is this, almost looks like a topographic map, something you would see if you were looking in geography at school, and you would see all those contour lines in a map.
I always thought it looked like making sweets, where you kind of get the molten sweet liquid and you fold it, you fold it, you fold it, you fold it, and then you end up with those kind of weird hard-boiled sweets with the patterns through them.
Well, on the basis that you are addicted to sugar, then that's of course the analogy you were going to bring, but I went with that kind of, nice bit of pastry. You're not a fan of breads and pastries. I am. You like the sugar more than I do. So yes, both of those are good analogies, but if you look at something like, for example, Zinn, they did a Damascus steel case where the dial and the case were all one piece. That had a much more traditional Damascus pattern that you would maybe typically see Quite often you see them on artisanal knives, pocket knives, pen knives. The kind of blades quite often are made of Damascus steel. In theory, it brings a toughening and a hardening of the material to the whole durability issue, and it also brings this fantastic looking pattern. Check out the show notes because you will see it much better there. And obviously, if you are watching this on YouTube, which you might be on a Saturday, you can see it on there as well. So, outside of that, all of the other Schofield things you expect. A chunky case, quite a specific design language. If you look at all of the models that they make, they all have this quite chunky, industrial type look, I would say. The lugs are almost quite fortress-like, big buttress style lugs on there as well. Albeit, I say all that, quite often a big watch might be a bit ungainly. These do wear very well. I have seen and been following this brand for quite a significant time. Haven't ever bought one yet, but I could see possibly one of these being in my future. What else do we know? 44 millimeters in diameter, 15 mil thick. That definitely plays to the chunky aspect. 200 meters of water resistance. No fear for going near water with this. The cases are machined and finished in Sussex in the UK. I don't know where they're forged. I'm going to guess at some big metal foundry. Whether or not that's in the UK, I don't know. But certainly all of the machining and finishing to get to that case that you see in the watch is done in the UK. And the dial. Definitely hints of someone we've also talked about here, and of course he has been involved, that being James Thompson, the Black Badger. He has been in and about the lumen this watch, and it can definitely be told. Lots of grooves, lots of patterning on the dial, lots of different levels. You've got everything from pinks and reds, blues and greens, and purples and oranges on here as well. More reserved during the day, and it definitely comes alive once that lume starts to glow. You've also got kind of different gradings or levels, I guess, of luminosity in there as well, so it plays around with the light. I think it's a fantastic looking watch. Unitas movement. I believe that the guys there have used Unitas quite a few times. Again, more commonly seen as movements from pocket watches. It probably plays into why this is a 44mm case as well. It needs that bigger case to get this movement in. 46 hours of power reserve. You can get it on a grey calfskin leather strap. There are only 40 of them, but they are not individually numbered, but there are only 40, and the retail price is 9,558 of your British pounds. That includes VAT. If you're outside the UK, take 20% VAT off that to get your price, but do remember, when it arrives in your country, you may or may not get stung for local taxes.
Well, I like it. I'm looking at the dial, I'm looking at the colours, I'm looking at the mixtures, and I'm getting vibes of rainbows, but we're not getting rainbows during the day, we're getting it when the lume activates at night, or if you've got a UV torch, which I'm pretty sure most people listening to this have got or will have on their wish list, because it's a very useful thing to check out the lume, especially when you're kind of hidden away in the dark and you're wanting to see exactly what's going on. But this one here, the dial lights up like something out of Tron, like a disc. We're looking at multicolours, lots of different variations. The dial has got the craziest little hand on the sub-second. Everything about it is mad. It looks like a fever dream. It looks like a hallucination. If you asked AI to come up with a variation of a Schofield watch, this is probably what it would shit out. So I don't know if Mid-Journey or anything like that has been used in the creation process of this. I doubt it, but I absolutely love this. If I had to compare it to any watches that I have in my collection, probably the really crazy looking, I don't even remember the name of it, it was a Fossil limited edition, and it was like a sundial, and you'd pop the top like a hunter case, and you'd have this mechanical movement underneath. That one was a lot less expensive than what we're looking at here, but the colour scheme, the girth of it, we know Dave loves some good girth. I think this is a win. The only problem is, will he be able to fulfill orders? Because I think this one, over and above all the previous releases, which have been quite similar in a very similar vein during the past series that he's had out, this one stands on its own, and a little bit like Isotope recently, with their completely polished dial and case. I think this is a departure from what's come before, not to knock anything in the past, but it's just like, you know, changing up a gear and off into the distance with this one. I think it's going to be an absolute win.
Considering it has a Damascus case, and considering, again, that they are pretty rare, it has to be said. There is a few, but not so many. And all of the ones that I'm aware of, as a general rule, are pretty expensive. I think, if I remember, the Zin was more likely up into the 5 figures. Yes, this is getting close to 5 figures, but nonetheless, an absolutely great looking watch. and it is a reminder.
Hey, you've not even talked about the back. If you flip the thing over, the name Obscura might come into play because there is a tri-lens arrangement, a little bit like if you decided to hype up the back of your iPhone, where you've got the 3 camera lenses. If you went to town on that and added a little bit of steampunk flair, that's what you might end up with looking at the back of this watch. So again, show notes to your friend, and we should have told you at the beginning, if you're listening, follow along at home, click the link in your podcast player, that'll take you to our website, to a page designated for this episode, and all the text back, the links, the pictures, they'll be there in chronological order, thanks to Mizzy L. And if you're watching us on YouTube, then that link will be in the description, so you can click that, and again, you can play along, you can read exactly what we're talking about, because we do get comments through saying, such and such a watch, where do I find out more about it? I didn't quite catch the name of it, didn't quite catch the spelling of it. I remember somebody complained and said that when we announce watches, we should phonetically spell them out to everybody. And I thought, why not just check the show notes? Because they'll be in there. Anyway, never mind. This is an absolute win. Maybe at some point we can actually get Giles onto the show, because I did an interview with him and Katja for the Alliance of British Watch and Clockmakers back in the day. But it'd be good to bring him on here and give him a bit of a bit of space to talk, because he knows how to tell a tale. And my wrist check. Well, should we do the wrist checks, Dave? Because I think mine's going to actually play into this, and I never realised that at all.
Before you rudely interrupted me, I was going to say, check the show notes out to see a picture of the case back. But of course, you rudely interrupted. Sure. So yes, Ricky, let's move along and let's do a wrist check. And you can go first, because I always come second.
Okie dokie. Well, I went digging through the watch box to find something that's not been on the wrist for a while. And I'm not the biggest fan of leather straps when it comes to watches. I think my favourite, as mentioned recently, is the Christopher Ward Moonphase. For some reason, they got it right. As much as Andrew Morgan likes to say Christopher Ward and leather straps do not mix, the one on the Moonphase is by far the best leather strap I have ever seen on a watch, and most of the watches that I buy do happen to have leather straps. The Apollo 8, the Snoopy, my Tudor Black Shield Fast Raider ceramic. There's even a couple other ones I can't even remember just now, and the Christopher Ward wins by a country mile. But the watch I'm wearing today is not Christopher Ward. It is actually from a country we're not really supposed to talk about, but since I own this watch, I'm going to talk about it because I love the watch, and I already bought it before things went tits up. So today's wrist check is a watch, as I said, I've not worn in a good long time. Not for the reason some people may think, just the fact that so many watches come in, so many watches are in the watch box, and so many are in the safety deposit box. It's hard to figure out what to wear next. But this is a very space age themed watch. It is the second watch from this brand that I got, and funnily enough, the first watch has got the same name, the Copernicus, and this is the re-edition based on the 70s and 80s one that came out from Raqueta. This one has just got a little bit more of everything, including a hell of a lot of AR coating. Very bulbous design when it comes to the sapphire on top. You've got a ring and a disc showing the time along with a second hand, and a very colourful dial that is supposed to look, I suppose, like our galaxy. And the reason I think it's quite similar to the Schofield that we just mentioned is because if I do remove the leather strap from the wrist and show you the back of the case, you will actually see there is a tiny little lens, a little porthole through which you can actually see my sweaty palm print, but you can also see the movement in there and that rotor rocking around underneath. So today I'm wearing my Raqueta Copernicus, the latest re-edition from the folks over there. We've done a number of shows with the guys over the past few years, and the guy at the helm is a very interesting fellow. Every time we pop across to Geneva and he is around, we catch up with him for a bit of a chinwag. So there we go, Dave. What have you got on the wrist?
Well, I can also link mine back to the Schofield, because I have to say, if you think it's a chunky watch, this I am wearing is definitely a chunky watch. And I am wearing a Seiko, this being the Marine Master Prospex 1000 metre 50th anniversary. Now there is a mouthful of a name. Its code is an SBDX014G. I'm not quite as savant as some of the Seiko fans about codes, but that is it. This one I've had for a good few years. It's quite unusual. It is a chunky 52-53mm baby. Full titanium case. It's got the ceramic shield on it as well, and it has this gold bezel on there. This is also on one of the very earliest of Erica's straps. Obviously, she has made quite a name for herself doing these parachute cord style straps. This was one of the very original ones when she first started making them.
So you could almost say that's one of Erica's originals.
Very clever, Ricky. Very clever. But yes, this is one of Erica's originals. There's a tongue twister for you. But yes, so that's what I've been wearing. I dug this out of a watch box whilst looking for a completely different watch. That's one that will probably make a bit of a seeing of itself on a wrist check in the near future. But I also found this while I was in it, and I thought, I'm going to wear that because I love it. Unusual for Marine Master, a lot of them are generally quartz. This one is a full automatic and it is an 8 series movement, so the top end movements that Seiko produce. Accuracy, yes, it has some. It has the date at 4.5 o'clock, which is actually nearer 5 o'clock than 4.5 o'clock. But anyway, it is a Seiko. And amazingly, what does the bezel do in this one, Ricky? It lines up.
The bezel aligns, but the second hand doesn't move. And can we go back to this 4.5 o'clock nonsense that you keep talking about?
Yes, because you've got 4, you've got 5, and halfway between 4 and 5 is halfway.
It's 4:30.
It makes no sense, but it does make sense to me. So that's what I'm wearing. Yes, because I haven't actually wound it up. So if I take it off camera.
Even though it's an automatic and you have a dicking around with it. But anyway, apart from that, is that part of the Monster series? Is that like an Arnie? Is it completely different? Because I know it's got that little shroud thing on it.
Here we go. So just to please Ricky, if you're looking at the show notes,
you give it a shuggle.
Just to please Ricky, if you are watching this on YouTube, it's now running. So it's a tuna. So it falls into the tuna family, which has got this kind of tuna can type aesthetic to it. Monster
looks more like a dog bowl.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know really what it looks like, but it's kind of ugly, pretty ugly. I do like it a lot, and weirdly, it wears extremely well. It's very comfortable. Obviously, it's a big case, but because it has got no lugs, a lot of watches, maybe in that 42 to 44 millimeter size, quite often have a very long lug to lug. This doesn't, because the lugs, well, they're not really lugs, but they're hidden underneath where the strap attaches. So that is what David is wearing this week.
Very nice. And we tell you guys, if you want to get in touch with us, drop us an email. Definitely do not DM us on Instagram because we'll not see it. Too much spam, too many bots. You know what the story is. And that email address for anybody that's interested is info@scottishwatches.co.uk. And we've had quite a flurry of activity, Dave.
I will also read it out because Ricky does not like reading out long emails. Hey guys, I wanted to see if any of you have any experience with ELZ, the electrician's watch. That's with a Z in the end. They are mostly Miyota electric module quartz movements. Some of the collection appear to be not too dissimilar to other high horology brands and concept in aesthetics. Am I missing this type of watch in my collection? I've not looked at the Accutron amongst a few others. I'm not sure what you're taking them. If you've had any hands-on, it would be good to see your thoughts. Many thanks, Sean. I will let you go first because I have an answer to this.
I quite like the look of them. I have seen them advertised all across the interwebs, especially on Instagram. Quite a number of adverts do pop up. They look to me like, and I've got to be careful because if this ends up on YouTube, which it probably will, then the words I'm about to say will get bleeped out, but you can infer what I'm about to say. This looks like somebody making a...
Yes, it does.
So yes, big boom. That is all I am saying. So Dave, you probably have got one of these in your collection or a multitude of them, and you probably have a lot of experience with them because you have many, many more years in this industry than I have. Tell us all about them.
So to answer your question, yes, I have one. I picked one up a good number of years ago, and that was because I think at the time they kept popping up either on my Facebook or my Instagram profile. That's quite often
Probably your MySpace.
It could have been that long ago indeed. But yes, they popped up, and being someone who is not afraid of a brighter colour, bright yellows, bright oranges, all these kind of real punchy colours, it kind of stood out to me. For sure, are they high horology? They definitely are not. Are they quite funky and a little bit different? Yes, I thought it was. They were relatively inexpensive. I actually haven't checked to see how much they are these days, but I remember paying in and around Swatch G-Shock type money for mine, and that was a good few years ago. I also did come across a few. Red Bar London, a couple of the members actually appeared wearing them over the years as well. Again, pretty much because they liked bright colours. They were looking for something that was a wee bit funky and was just an everyday, don't worry too much if it gets damaged or lost type watch for many of them. So all I can say is, as long as you set your bar at what it is and what it is not, you will probably be quite happy with it if you enjoy brighter coloured watches. That's all I've got to say. Love it, loathe it. If you like it, that's all that matters.
It totally is. And there's a couple of watches that have just come out that are also on that lower price point. Milking things is what Swatch Group seem to do, especially with their collabs of recent times. But they've got some new ones out that I really quite like the look of, and one of them is very reminiscent of my Freak X Magma edition from Ulysses Nordan. And I don't know if I actually want to go and buy more Moonswatches, Dave. Are you going to?
I do quite like these, but I agree they are maybe milking that cow pretty hard. They're maybe right at the last drips of milk coming out of it. So what are we talking about? Obviously, they've had their full set of 11 watches, Mission 2, and Insert the Planet in the Solar System. They've also had the Moonshine Gold variants. I believe there were also 11 of those, which kind of celebrated the full moons. And of course, not that long ago, they introduced both the black and the white edition of the Snoopies with the moon phase complication on there as well. They have
No, you're not saying a little bit like Star Wars that they are totally ripping the piss right out of everybody. I saw a post about the new, I don't even know the name of it. I couldn't even imagine what the name of it is. There's a new series to do with Star Wars, and the Critical Drinker and loads of other people on YouTube have just absolutely rinsed the thing, saying, I think it's 23 or 24 movies and TV series have come out in the last 10 years to do with Star Wars, and everybody is fucking sick of it.
The one you're talking about is called The Acolyte, and I don't mind some of them. I've quite enjoyed a couple of the series in the past. I did start to watch this one. Let's just say it is maybe being a bit repetitive and they are pulling at threads and it might come apart very soon. Anyway, back to these. Yes, your analogy stands well. There are now 3 new additions to the range. These are not Mission 2. These ones are called Mission On, and they're all called Mission on Earth. I believe the concept of these is either looking at certain features or meteorological feats or big events such as volcanic eruptions on Earth, but looking at them as if you were in space. And there are 3 that have been added to this. There are lava, polar lights, and desert. Obviously, lava, hopefully self-explanatory. What lava looks like as it's pouring out a volcano as you look at it from space. Colour-wise, you'll probably never guess the colour palette for this, Ricky.
Would this be the one I said looks like my red watch?
That'll be the one. The next one is polar lights. Obviously, there's been a lot in the news, certainly in the UK, about the Aurora Borealis, which is the northern lights or the polar lights. And the only thing that really plays to my happiness about this is the colour is turquoise, which means I get to say turquoise properly again. And the final one is the desert. Obviously, many of the large deserts on planet Earth visible from space. As you would expect, a sandy palette of colour to this one as well. So you've got both this orangey red colour in the lava. Ricky probably likes that one the most. Then you've got this turquoise, and then you've got the desert.
I'm going to jump in here and say that the desert one's shit, right? Because that kind of looks like one that came out before. Maybe Neptune, not sure. The one that is being called turquoise by our Dave here is more peppermint, and the one that's supposed to be red looks orange, completely orange in certain pictures. I have no idea what this is going to look like. It might look like a Dynarod van when you actually see the thing in real life.
Well, I have seen them, so I can answer your question. It does look quite orange, and in pictures, I could see where you get that from. It definitely doesn't look like a Dynarod van in real life. If it did, I would be a very happy guy. It is definitely a kind of more deep burgundy, reddy orange colour. Maybe terracotta might be a suitable way to describe it. It's much darker in real life than you think it's going to be. It's not as orange as you think, which was my big disappointment of it.
Orange. Okay.
Yep. What I will say to you is the box is orange, but the watch is definitely a redder hue when you see it in real life. Anyway, I do agree with your peppermint description. That is a very good description of the polar lights colour. Obviously, some folk have used that word being the T word, Tiffany blue. It's not Tiffany blue. It's definitely more a turquoise or peppermint. And yes, you're right, Ricky, the desert is very reminiscent of a colour that has been used in the previous Mission 2 ones. I can't remember which one. I will call it the Keith Brown one. But yes, that. It also partly resembles the sandy colour that IWC have used on one of their ceramic watches over the last couple of years. The big news is, though, the dials or the sub-registers are now in the radial dial style, which has been seen on certain watches such as the Alaska 2, the Alaska 3 models, something a little bit different. So you've got a point of difference to some respect from the others, but at the end of the day, it's another bioceramic plastic Swatch watch. I think it's cool. I like them. Am I going to buy one? No, I've already got enough of them already. The Snoopy one is cool. If you've not got a Snoopy in the white or the black, that's probably the one I would go for. Price point in line with all the Mission 2 variants of the watch. So in and around the 250 to 300 mark, depending on what little squiggly symbol is in front of your currency.
Fair enough. And we have another email in, and this one is just as long as the last one, but it's my turn to read it out, so here I go. Hi gents, just a note that sometimes over the last couple of weeks my podcast app has stopped downloading your podcast. Well, that means he's probably not going to hear this. I use Overcast on an iPhone, latest OS and version of Overcast installed. All of my other sub-channels are working fine. Yours just sits there saying waiting to download. And finally it goes to download failed. Screen grabs attached. I deleted your channel from my subs, then resubbed, but still no joy. Same issues. Fingers crossed though, something your side that can be nudged, otherwise nothing more I can do. Little greeting face. All the best from Rory. Now Dave can't answer this one because it's me that does the uploads, and nothing has changed. And it appears in Apple Podcasts, and it appears on Spotify, and if something is going to go tits up and mess things up royally, it would not appear on those two platforms because they're the most pernickety when it comes to uploading. And as I say, nothing has changed on our end. So hopefully Rory will hear this by using Spotify. Or since he's on iOS, he'll be using Apple Podcasts. But if he doesn't, I'll reply to him, just so he actually gets the message.
Well, there you go. Now we have another better value watch. We'll not call it budget, we'll call it better value watch. So we've talked about the recent addition that Swatch have pushed or shoved into that Moonswatch range. Now we're going to talk about a Seiko 5, this being one of the Seiko 5 Sports.
Oh, who's going to talk about it? Well, I'll talk about it initially because there are so many Seiko 5s that we just stopped talking about them. Unless it was something absolutely crazy, stand out like the Queen edition, the Bruce Lee edition, or I don't even know, there were some Beatles ones and things in the past. There are loads of variations, tons of them come out all the time, but these two that we have in front of us today, I think they're just a little bit different. And I don't know if it's because the bracelet is very, very 70s, and that 70s vibe has been carrying on for the past couple of weeks, if not months here, Scottish Watches Towers. These ones stick out, and it's not just me that's appreciating them, it's not just you that's highlighted them. All the blogs, all the Instagram channels, loads of YouTubers are getting on board with it because there's just something different about these two.
And this is where Seiko 5 really excels and shines in my book. Yes, there are huge numbers of variations, and you could also possibly accuse Seiko of milking that cow that also Swatch have. Maybe they passed it over, maybe they have timeshare on it, but...
But Dave, it's not just the same look and feel with moving the hue slider in Photoshop. They actually do produce different dials, different handsets, date complications, different bezels that sometimes align, sometimes don't, different bracelets, sometimes it's on rubber, sometimes it's in leather. So I don't think we can say they're milking it.
Well, we can maybe say they are potentially milking it because there are many variants of the same watch. But you're right, they do bring out a couple of little blinders here and there, whether it's some of the limited editions, sometimes punchy colours, sometimes quite subdued. But in this case, these are two of the best releases in the Seiko 5 range, certainly in a good few months, if not possibly a good couple of years. These are the Seiko 5 Sports Heritage Cayman Riders. To give them their official names, they are the SRPL03 and the SRPL05. These basically are recreations of probably one of the most iconic Seiko 5 models that was produced back in the late 1960s. When they kind of relaunched the whole Seiko 5 project back in 2019, the idea was to have accessible watches that really brought forward the SKX vibe, that SKX being many people's entry points to mechanical watches, or watches in fact just in general. So many people love that original SKX, for many years only available as JDM or Japanese domestic market watches, but they have relaunched the Seiko 5 range back in 2019, as I mentioned, as a world global release. This one, a nicer size than some, 38.5mm. I think that's a pretty good sweet spot. Lug to lug of 44.8mm, so should be pretty wearable for many people. You've got the crown at 4 o'clock, not 4.5 o'clock, at 4 o'clock. Of course, you've got the Hardlex mineral glass as opposed to a sapphire crystal. That's very much price point driven. You've got the rotating bezel, which may or may not align, but you know, that's part of the fun of Seiko 5s. You have a water resistance of 100 meters. Essentially, what's the difference between the 03 and the 05 model? One has a brushed silver dial, the other has a matte black dial on there. Really very similar, very undertoned, very reminiscent of the originals. They've done a great job. You've got that 41 hours of power reserve with the 4R36 movement, 400 of your British pounds, 460 of your euros, and I'm sure it will be in and around the 400 and something mark in US dollars. Limited edition, of course it is, Seiko Live a limited edition. Not that small a number. There are 9,999 of the silver and of the black. So roughly 20,000 in all. Not that limited edition a number, but I guess when it comes to there only being £400 to buy one of these, they're going to be pretty popular.
Before Dave says, and what does Ricky think? Ricky thinks some good things of these, and there's been many that I've liked, there have been many that I've not liked, and I love the fact that these are on a pillow cushion shaped case. Very 70s, do love it. The bracelet, I don't know if that's a hair puller or not, so we're going to have to wait until somebody buys them and then gets in touch with us to let us know. So if you bought one of these and it has absolutely decimated the hairs on your wrist and in the back of your hand, let us know. Love the fact that these are inexpensive, because a lot of people have been saying slowly but slowly the price of Seikos had been creeping up the way, which everybody has. I mean, look at the price of Speedies just 5-6 years ago versus the entry-level Speedy prices today, and it is night and day. So the fact that you're getting something here for around about the 400 quid mark, I think that is fantastic value for money. Obviously, everything's in-house because the movement that's inside, they produce, they make the case, they make everything. I think they even make, obviously, the glass that goes on it because it's not sapphire. So if you like it, go grab it quick, speak to your local dealer, and see if they can sort you out.
And now it's my turn to read another email. We have plenty of emails this episode. Hi guys, great job on the podcast. Listen all the time. So I am a Scottish guy living in Prague and a watch geek. I have just completed my collection of high-end hand-wound chronos, and I was thinking of doing a short "How are they to live with" review. Got a bit of time in my hands and want to keep my mind occupied. I'm talking about Vacheron Historic, Lange and Patek, and would like to get a few picks in there and something on buying experience. Let me know if this is something of interest to you or your readers, or should I just forget it? Cheers, Grant. Well, I say, absolutely. If you want to get involved, we say it all the time. If you want to write something for us, do some pictures for us, just get involved in the Scottish watches ecosystem. By all means, we will reach out to you and we will put you in contact with the bold Mizzy L, who is the person, the ringmaster, the person who cracks the whip to get the guys writing articles, taking photographs and speaking about new launches. So we will put you in contact with Mizzy L. Good luck with that. I hope you're good at keeping timelines.
Just watch out for the spelling. You do the spell checking first before you send it to Miz. That's the handy hint I'm going to give you. And next up, we're going to talk about Longines. And it's very odd. There are a whole load of things that are kind of tied together over the past couple of weeks, and Longines seems to be the centre point of the universe. It's a little bit like 1955 in the Back to the Future series. We met a woman by complete accident when we were out and about over the last couple of days, and she said that a relative of hers, I don't know if it was her father or her grandfather, actually used to work at the Longines store in London. Dave, do you want a picture on that one?
Indeed. So Longines have a boutique in London. It is currently located on Oxford Street, not that far from the junction with Bond Street, but it is there. It's a lovely little boutique, and it kind of sits alone a little bit from all of the other boutiques, which tend to either be down Bond Street, New Bond Street, or out towards the end of Oxford Street, nearer the area where Selfridges is. But it sits there and it does a fine job. And yes, she mentioned that she liked watches. She had nothing to do with the watch industry. We weren't even talking to her about watches. We were talking to her about
and we'll tell you who she is and what she does slightly later on. But who was this person? Was it a dad? Was it a granddad? I can't remember.
She did. She mentioned either her father or grandfather had passed these down to her, because that individual had been the guy that stands on the door, kind of the concierge, so to speak, or what we would call nowadays security, at the
bouncer.
Boutique, the bouncer. At the boutique, the Longines boutique in London, and that this had been passed down to her. And she definitely said that under no circumstances would that watch ever be leaving her collection.
Anyway, enough about that. We're not talking about old watches just now, we're talking about new ones. And there are a collection of funky colours just in time for summer, although summer seems to not really be here in Scotland. It showed its head, it disappeared, And I mean, I'm looking for the benefits of climate change and global warming because Scotland might actually get some sunlight. We don't know, but we hope. These new watches, they look rather funky. Longines, I think it's just about time that they broke through. Over the past number of years, I think Tissot has had the limelight, especially with things like the PRX coming back out and then milking that one with so many different colorways and variations of style and bracelet, etc., etc. I think it's time Longines come back because there is so much history there that just doesn't get talked about anymore because I think they're seen as an also ran, which is terrible, just because they're more economically priced, more attainable, and maybe they aren't at the pinnacle within Sports Group of the likes of Omega and such like. But these ones here really do like the look of them, Dave. So what do you think?
Absolutely. I was about to say the same, and you've hit the nail on the head. I think the time for Longines is about to come to the fore. For sure, for many, many years, Omega has been the poster boy of the Swatch Group. They've been doing great things, but they are slowly but surely moving into a much higher price point category. Of course, Tissot's always been great, super accessible, great price points, good value for money, and it's always done well. And Longines has kind of sat in the doldrums, not really sure what is it. It's not Omega, and it's better and more expensive than Tissot. It's a bit in no man's land. But I think because of the general climate, cost of living, inflation, all of these things, because Omega is now much more expensive than it was in the past, Longines is maybe hitting that sweet spot as far as price goes, and it's got a huge catalogue of watches and a real wealth of history to lean back on. Now, we're talking about 3 or 4 new watches that they've added to the range, this being the Conquest range. This is their three-hander, quite a classic, clean-looking watch, but they've definitely added some summer. Not that, as Ricky says, we're getting any summer in Scotland. The only summer we get is it stays lighter for longer. It definitely doesn't get sunny. We have 34mm, 3 pastel-hued watches, and those colours are cotton candy pink, baby blue, and a soft green. You have a date on all of them. You've got Super Luminova on the hour and minute hands. You've got the indices at 3, 6, and 9 o'clock also loomed on there. Stainless steel bracelet or rubber strap options. You can have your choice of what you want. These are very good looking watches with all of what you would expect from a Swatch Group owned brand. Silicon technology, in-house movements on there, great quality of finish, and maybe now positioning themselves in a space and a price point that offers extremely strong value for money, maybe where Omega were 10 years ago, shall we say. And these watches are definitely well worth a look. Lots and lots of sizes in the Conquest range, everything from 30mm, you've got 34mm, you've got 38mm, and that's just the ones I know from the top of my head. Price points ranging from just under the $2,000 mark up to just over the $3,000 mark, depending on bracelet, strap, whether it's got diamond dot applique markers, lots of different variations there. But these 3 new additions, that being these pastel hue coloured ones, I think they look great. So if you're after a really nice quality, well-priced summery watch, this could be your answer.
Could be. And it reminds me of perhaps a less expensive Aquaterra or OP if you were looking across the ranges for Omega and Rolex. And having handled a whole load of Longines recently, I'll tell you about that in a second, I think these are vastly underrated. And again, we're coming in at a price point that is not crazy. It's like it's taken the baton from Omega all 5 or 6 years ago and it's running with it. It's the same kind of quality. The finish is really, really good. They've not dropped the quality, even though the price point is lower than Omega. And the dials are fantastic. And the reason we're talking about these in particular, as much as they've just come out and they caught our eye, is we were at a launch event in Glasgow at the Longines boutique. Yes, there was an actual standalone boutique in Glasgow where people can come along, check out the entire range. And the staff in there are the most knowledgeable people that I've spoken to in the industry in a good long time. So if you're in Glasgow or you're travelling around Scotland and you want to pop in, I would definitely recommend doing so. Got to check out some new models, including these ones, ahead of launch. And there was even some folks coming in on the night to do some whiskey testing. And there was a gentleman that came in that instantly recognised me. So hello to you, anonymous listener guy who came in with a crazy looking Longines pocket watch styled wristwatch that was massive. It had a hunter case on it. It was really, really cool. Caught the eye of me and Simona. We loved having a chat with the guys in there. And it's just a case of you get a lot for your money with these. Do not overlook it because you think it's a brand that's perhaps not in the upper echelons of watch collecting. I think, and Dave agrees with me, that things are on the up and up, and maybe Longines are the next ones to get a push.
Definitely worth a look. And I think that one you were talking about might possibly be the Avagacion A7. Did it have the offset crown on it and a Hunter caseback on it?
It had the Hunter case back, and I wasn't paying too much attention because it was free alcohol.
Well, there we go. I think it would be that. Yes, definitely worthy of a look. Whilst many of the Longines you see are quite traditional, maybe slightly dressy in their look and feel, they've got a great military heritage, and many of their heritage pieces are absolutely worthy of a look. And I think you're right. These three hued watches, pastel coloured hued watches, for me, they definitely remind me of something, as you said, like those new colours of the Aquaterra, but at a much, much more attainable price point. Not to say that the Aquaterra is not a great watch, it is, but altogether a more accessible price point at around the 2,000 to 3,000 mark on these ones.
Here's a question for you. Based on the normies, the layman on the street or the laywomen on the street, Omega doesn't quite have the brand cachet that Rolex does, or perhaps even some of the other brands like Breitling. People seem to know Breitling over Omega. If somebody was to buy the Longines version versus the Aquaterra, do you think it would be a problem?
I would probably disagree slightly. I think for sure Rolex has a whole different world of cachet and brand awareness with the layperson in the street, for absolutely sure. I think Omega is definitely within the other two or three brands that many, many people would mention.
I don't think so. I think Breitling and Tag.
Tag for definite, many people will do it. Omega will quite often be mentioned, obviously with things like the Olympic Games, obviously with things like James Bond, and lots of other placements. It is a brand that I believe is definitely within the sphere of people.
But is there that much of a gap between in the perception of the public? And if people are buying for brand awareness, which some people obviously do, is there that much of a gap between Longines and Omega?
If I'm truly honest, outside of Rolex and maybe the wrapper watches, your Pateks, your things like your Richard Mille's, I think most folk probably don't really grade most of the watches, including Omega, in any real meaningful differential. So I think if you're wearing a nice Swiss watch, and that could definitely be a Longines, most people would comment and say, that's a nice watch. I don't think they would necessarily think of it in the same way as maybe a Rolex, Rolex being that tick box for success, or Patek and the other brands which are the ultra high luxury brands. But then in the same way as brands like Vacheron, we know an amazing high horology brand. I think the average person in the street would have no idea what Vacheron is.
I think that's one of the benefits that we have when we get sent watches in from different places, because Rolex don't deal with us, Patek don't deal with us, and the other brands do deal with us, and it's very unlikely if we're out testing something that someone on the high street that is maybe looking to separate owner from watch might spot something on the wrist and say, I'm having that. So that's a benefit for us. And we should probably talk about things we've been up to, because we've been kind of teasing in a lot of information. There was an event in Glasgow that I convinced Dave and Gav, they've never met each other until this event. I dragged them both together, it was like a blind date. And we went along to the SEC, which is the main exhibition and conference centre within Glasgow. And this was called Kit Plus, this big event. And it wasn't as big as I thought, but it was definitely compressed, condensed, and saturated. It was a free thing for people in the media who wanted to buy cameras, or they wanted to hire equipment because they're making film, TV, or as it turns out, us guys doing podcasts and YouTube. And we spent a good couple of hours going around speaking to all types of folks. So Dave, I always talk about what happens and what we're up to, so you can lead the floor with this one.
As Ricky mentioned, Kit Plus, a show that I believe they exhibit in a couple of places in the UK, but they were in Glasgow, and Ricky managed to find out about it, and off we went. Small, compact and beignet, but definitely interesting, with some cool stuff to be seen, and also some cool people who have managed to have a chat to at this. We got to look at a couple of later additions to the market of some audio equipment, some video editing equipment. Ricky got to have a conversation about some software and graphics cards with a company that it turns out are only a few miles away from where we both live, and they specialise in audio and visual equipment as well. So yes, we had a great time at this. We got plenty of swag, or should we say Gav got plenty of swag, because...
Listen, I'm going to jump in and say Gav is the new master when it comes to acquiring stuff, because at one of the places where we're actually discussing, new equipment that we need to get so we can keep up with the Joneses when it comes to editing video quicker to get more stuff out, the guy was talking away to us, and as he's talking, some swag is getting placed on the desk in front of him, and Gav spots 3 NVIDIA umbrellas. And at the end of the thing, as we're about to walk away thinking, we've done well enough, we've managed to get a water bottle and a mug and a t-shirt, Gav says to the guy, "Don't forget our umbrellas."
He did. And then you took one, and he took one. I decided I've already got enough umbrellas. But no, he was pretty insistent that I had to take the third umbrella. I think it was a little bit like that Scottish phrase, "Go on, you know you want it." So anyway, I didn't take it, which was much to his upset. Ricky had a fully stuffed sack.
Do you want me to empty my sack right now, Dave? In front of everybody?
No, maybe,
I can do it. Look,
maybe not.
I'll do it right now.
You do it.
So, things we
Oh.
got were, I'll start with the easy stuff, a ton of cinematographer magazines that probably cost an absolute fortune. We also got, which you probably won't be able to see too well, but on camera, yeah, there we go, a Shure t-shirt, official
Good
Shure
t-shirt.
from the guys that make this microphone, the Joe Rogan microphone, the SM7B.
Good stuff. Very good. Like these guys.
We also got this super cool water bottle from Genelec, which is a speaker company, as far as I'm aware. Dave and Gav, while I was away talking to someone else, got me this Pelly cap to go along with all the different caps that I own. Not forgetting mugs, because Dave is a mug, but he's not here all the time. And possibly the coolest little addition to the fridge here at Scottish Watches Tuah is a baby fridge magnet that looks like a clapperboard.
Well, better than you having the clap like usual, I guess. It can stick to the fridge and keep itself nice and cool.
And that was it, apart from we spotted a person that was working for a brand called MPB. I think that's how you pronounce it. Yes, it is, looking at what I've got in front of me. And they specialise in I'm not allowed to say second hand, apparently it's pre-owned equipment, buying and selling. And because we spent time with her going through stuff and just basically, chatting away because she was left on her own and everyone was just bypassing her, she gave us some free memory cards, and I thought, oh, that's dead nice. And then I got home and I opened it and I had a look at the memory card, and bearing in mind the cameras that we use, the smallest memory card in any of the devices that I have is probably 512 gig, half a terabyte, due to the size of files these days. The memory cards that they were handing out were 32 gig, which I think you can store about 10 minutes of stuff on these days. But hey, it was free.
You can utilise it though, possibly for audio files, as they are slightly smaller.
I am sure that I would trust our audio to a non-brand freebie card. It's like when you get handed USB drives and people genuinely think you're actually going to store useful stuff on them and it's still going to be there in a year's time.
No, goodbye.
But anyway, that show was really cool. Got to check out lots of different brands that were there, apart from the swag and local businesses. Sony were there with the latest camera. I can't remember what it's called. It's not called a Bueno, because that's a nice little chocolate from a far afield place. Red were there showcasing stuff that I don't care about. Nikon weren't there, unfortunately. Shure were there, the guys that do the mics. They were really cool, gave us some good swag. And Warehouse Express, which is now known as WEX, where most of my money goes when a new camera or a lens or a tripod or a light or a sound device comes out. So I enjoyed that. You enjoyed that. You got to meet Gav for the first time and enjoy his very peculiar way of dealing with life.
He is unique. Yes, Gavin, you are unique, and I hope you're very much enjoying your umbrella.
And apart from that, anything you've been up to apart from that, Dave?
Nope, not a huge amount. Have watched a couple of interesting things. You had watched the Blackberry documentary stroke dramatisation. I watched it. Very good it is as well. And my recommendation is there is a limited box set. I think it's like 6 episodes. A thing called A Man in Full. It is excellent. Definitely worth watching. Funny, quite dry, bit dark in places, but yes, definitely worthwhile watching. And the end, which I will not spoil, is amazingly good. So that is pretty much all I've been up to, because I've been very busy at work with a few launches et al. You, though, have been up to a few other things. That pesky car of yours still giving you a bit of bother?
No, but the wheels were. I had them powder coated a while back and they must have not fully got rid of whatever it was underneath, because some corrosion appeared. And we're not talking stone chips, curb damage, or anything like that. Just random corrosion started to appear that was never there before. So I took the car back in and I got a loaner car for a week while they were getting sorted out. Got one of the brand new base model Boxsters, which nowadays is not your flat six. It is a 2 litre turbo, running about 300 horsepower, and very comfortable because it's not quite as low to the deck as the S model of the GTS. And I had that for a week, played around with it. Didn't really like turbo lag. And I compared this 2024 model year to a car that I had that was made in 1994. So we're talking 3 decades of a difference. And that was my Toyota MR2 Turbo GT Revision 3. It had 300 horsepower. It was mid-engined. It was a 2 litre, 4-cylinder, 16 valve. And it didn't seem to have the same amount of turbo lag as this brand new Porsche. So I have a feeling that the folks over in Stuttgart like to hobble their lower end vehicles so as not to encroach and cannibalise the sales of their higher end vehicles. Because as soon as I jumped back in my car, I felt a dramatic quickness. It was just night and day. There was no lag. It was instant throttle response, and my car is a little bit older than that. So glad to have mine back. It's looking tickety-boo. Guys at Porsche Glasgow did a great job on it. They did a full valet and a detail. They do that cool thing where they hoover or vacuum, depending where you stay on the planet. They hoover the mat in different ways, and it's looking like a football pitch where you've got the alternating lines in it. I know it's completely quite like that. It's quite good. And anyway, speaking of Porsche, there is a watch that came out just before we hit record in the last episode that me and Dave were on talking about new releases, and that is a collaboration with Tag Heuer and Porsche. Not Porsche Design, but Porsche themselves.
A very fitting way and a nice segue to round out this episode. Tag Heuer have released a Carrera Chronograph X Porsche 963. I actually quite like this. I'm not the biggest fan of the Carrera range of models from Tag Heuer. The Glassbox models they've released in the last year and a little bit have been more to my taste than I have previously, but this one I do like. Quite an aggressive looking watch, lots of use of forged carbon fibre on here, a skeletonized dial, lots of lume. I definitely get the vibes of that racier end of Porsche, the kind of cup cars, the track cars, the ones that you see being raced just before maybe you're watching something like Formula 1 or Formula 2 quite often as well. Yes, good looking watch. It's got their latest edition of the Heuer O2 movement, which is, I believe, now called the Caliber T820-00. Why they've renamed it, who knows. They've also upped their warranty from 2 years to 5 years, so much more in line with many of the other brands from Richemont, our Swatch group as well, so having that longer security of warranty in there. They're only going to be producing 963. I wonder where they got that number from, and it's going to be priced at 9,000 Swiss francs. Good looking watch, 44 mil, so fairly sizable, 15.01 millimeters in height, stainless steel mixed with that forged carbon fibre, and you've got this kind of tubular type aesthetic going on with it, which I guess is very reminiscent of a roll cage that you would see in some of the sport pack Porsches or, as I mentioned, the race orientated cars. I like this. I think Ricky will probably quite like this as well.
It's a bit reminiscent of the Nanograph, the Tourbillon tag that I liked from many years ago. Obviously, this is a slightly different colour, but it shares a lot of the DNA and the family heritage. The fact it says Porsche on the bezel itself is pretty cool. It's kind of in the way, but not in the way. You know, it's not emblazoned everywhere. It's not a Mario Kart style thing for Tag. And the crisscross design up near the 12 o'clock position on the dial. You called it a roll cage. Yeah, kind of more like a strut brace, I think, you know, as you would see sort of in the back of the cabin. It works. I like the look of it, the colour scheme, the fact that the lugs protrude right up to the bezel, and it's not crazy pricing. You'd think with a collab with Porsche's name on it, you would spend a lot more money on that, potentially twice as much. I think it's really good. We have a good relationship with the guys at Tag, thankfully, and now their new CEO, Julian, has been there for quite some time. It's probably about time we dropped him a quick email and said, hey, do you want to come on the show and tell us how things have been the last few months? Because he did great guns when he was at Zenith, and he's actually improved things in the short term over at Tag. So looking forward to seeing what he comes out with next.
So I think that's a fairly fitting way to round out this show, but we should definitely say to you, go check out the back catalogue. Many, many episodes there. You may have listened to all of them, but I bet you there's some you've missed. Some of the more recent ones, we had Ben Rousseau on recently. He was talking about his clocks, someone that we met at the British Alliance of Watch and Clockmakers, one of the few clockmakers that was exhibiting at that event. And if you're watching this on YouTube, right over Ricky's shoulders is one of his fine pieces there, right behind him. We've also had the dial artist on. Chris was on talking about his trials and tribulations of the last few years of his movements and doings and sakings in the watch industry. Also, of course, there is Andrew Morgan, both in podcast and on YouTube, telling us all about what he has been up to since he handed his ticket in at Watchfinder and set out in his own merry way with Andrew Morgan watches.
The dial artist one is quite good, and we've had a lot of comments on Ben Rousseau's episode and the dial artist because it is not the usual kind of thing that we do. So if you haven't listened to those, you've been busy, definitely go back and have a listen. And with Chris, the dial artist, he was talking about trials and tribulations working with brands that perhaps weren't doing so great. And there's a story brewing that I am doing a bit of investigation on at the moment. It might go one way, it might go the other, about a brand that may be in financial difficulty and is not paying their bills. And there's a couple of little things going on in the background, so stay tuned for information if that one does actually develop the way I think it will. But that is it. Thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and we'll catch you guys again soon.